In our agency we have to respond to dead body calls to determine if it was a murder or some other way. When officers get dispatched to dead body reports, they recognize the address because they've known the lady to be a drug addict for years. When they see the lady dead in her bed, they assume she overdosed because she's a heroin addict and a rock cocaine smoker. The police are waiting for the coroner's investigator to arrive, but the investigator pulls down the blankets and sees that the woman has been stabbed to death. The police never even bothered to pull down the blankets. If you think you know the answer to something before you start investigating, you're going to miss it. Either you're going to get the wrong reason, the wrong assumption or inference, or you're just not even going to look for any further evidence because you think you know the answer already. How do I know what kind of death this is? I make two lists. The first list is evidence, the second list is explanations, and I cross off the one that seems least reasonable. If we change the scenario to a dead guy laying face down in a pool of his own blood, we can't cross out anything else because we can't think of a natural opening in his chest to bleed out of. So let's change this scenario to a dead guy laying face down in a pool of his own blood with a knife in his back. I'm going to cross that accidental and leave it in suicide. If the victim has multiple stab wounds on his upper back, we can cross out suicide, but if there are bloody footprints leading out of the room, we know it's a homicide. Jimmy is still alive and he's now working these same kinds of investigations, and this is exactly how he approaches the most important piece of evidence in the Christian world. As I read the Gospels, I thought there was one piece of evidence for the Christian worldview that I could use to debunk the Christian worldview, and Lucky used the exact same approach. We could use this approach to know if the resurrection of Jesus is true. I would have said the tomb is empty, because if it's not empty, you can end Christianity in the first 2 weeks, or you can get the people who say Jesus is alive still to recant. Neither one of those two things happened, so Christianity could still be false. I still believe that Christianity was false because I thought there were better ways to explain these 4 things, and I found 6 explanations for those 4 things that atheists offer. The bottom explanation is a Christian explanation. I didn't go there. I figured one of these top 6 would get it done, so I focused on those top 6, and here's why I think Jesus wasn't really dead on the cross. Jesus is not dead yet, because a fisherman said that there came water out of his side. People in the first centuries didn't think that John was telling the truth, because they didn't understand the science of death. John wrote this okay, and everyone who read it in the first 500 years said no, it couldn't be water, but they didn't understand the science. Look, if you've ever been at a car accident or a murder scene. If I get there and they die before I leave, you will see your body does weird things. Your body starts to shut down, and if your heart stops, you will suffer one of 2 kinds of effusion, pericardial effusion or pleural effusion. Nobody knew this back in those days, and even the people who read John didn't know this, but John saw it, so he recorded it, and now you have hidden science that demonstrates that Jesus' heart actually stopped. If you've touched a dead person, you know that it's not like the movies or TV, and that death looks different. I want to teach you the signs of death, and I'll take you to the Los Angeles County Coroner's office. This is in downtown LA. You walk up these stairs and you go in this door, and you can buy t-shirts like this in the Los Angeles County Coroner's gift shop. The coroner's office is a disgusting, stinky place where hundreds of bodies go through every day, and the reason why they're metal is so you can wash them off and all the blood goes down here. People actually do eat in the examination rooms. When you die, you start to cool down and get stiff. This is called algar mortis. If you are in a cross position for a couple of hours, your arms will slowly decrease, and if you die on a cross, your feet will swell and turn purple. Do you really think that the people taking Jesus' body off the cross would have mistaken the living person for death? Some folks like stories and movies about conspiracy theories, but these guys are the stupid people. Okay, you know how hard it is to pull off a successful conspiracy, but if you think you're aware of a successful conspiracy, it wasn't successful by definition, and successful conspiracies nobody ever hears about. You need the smallest number of co-conspirators possible, and you want to hold the lie for the shortest period of time. If you don't want to kill your sibling, have excellent communication with your sibling, and when one of your parents jams up one of you, make sure your sibling repeats the exact same response. When you have more than one suspect, separate them before you do interviews. Make sure you say it the same way to your sibling. Pick the strongest possible relationship to do the conspiracy, avoid pressure from your parents, and make sure you're so good at it they never ask the first question. Look, there are already too many people involved, not just James and John and Peter, and Paul says there are 500 people who saw the risen Christ on the same day. Let's play Clue, the original Clue board, and see how long 500 plus people can keep a lie for several generations. They can't even Snapchat each other, so how can they keep a conspiracy going for several decades? How do you talk to each other when there is significant pressure from the weapons? What would Jack Bauer do to get to the truth? You don't think that these guys were torturing these guys, yet nobody ever breaks their story or changes their story. Matthew was an outcast who was not related to any of these people and wasn't even their friend, yet he held on to this lie allegedly. Paul sees Jesus by himself on the road to Damascus and the two other people don't see Jesus, so do you think that Paul wants Jesus to be alive and that's why he's seeing this? Paul was executing Christians. When two people recall the exact same details of the same event, it bugs me. The Marys require that they actually recite the same thing, and this happens over and over again. The 10 men who saw the same thing at the tomb were joined by Thomas, and now we have several groups where you have at least the 11. This episode here at the mountaintop is not clear if it's just the 12 or if it's all the others, and then there's this episode where he's going to ascend into heaven. Jesus never died on a cross, rose from the grave, but at the end of his ministry he rose into the air and ascended into heaven. If you saw this dude just ascend into heaven you would be a believer. Paul says there are 500 people who saw the risen Christ, and if you wanted to falsify this, just go back to the tomb and look for a body. I'm back to conspiracy theory. Somebody had to steal the body out, and you already know why I reject conspiracy theories. This is why a white ball puts it this way. He says, folks, we're not making this stuff up. We were eyewitnesses of His Majesty. So for me, is it possible? Anything's possible. Con men need two things to con people: the confidence of the people they're lying to and a better knowledge of the con than they do. If someone is trying to fool the disciples, they need somebody from the inner circle. I'm just kind of trying to figure out who this could be, but I think it's a weak explanation, so I crossed it. I'm going to send you all this, and that link I gave you yesterday includes this talk. This one we talked about yesterday is the last one where they distorted the story. You already know that it's not a late legend because the resurrection is part of the very first ever recorded documents related to Christianity. The Christian explanation is simply that those are telling the truth those documents are telling, and every explanation has strengths and weaknesses. Even the true explanation, when I do a trial in front of a jury, I know that my case has some weaknesses. I think the Christian explanation has weaknesses that are deal killers, but I will give you this: the Christian explanation does best explain those four things we're trying to explain, and those four things are absolutely reasonable if in fact he rose from the grave. You haven't investigated the claim yet. Don't care, don't believe in the supernatural, but wait a minute, I'll show you some evidence. I'll show you how early the documents are, but don't care, don't believe in the supernatural junk. I can show you archaeology. Don't care. If I have this attitude, you will find a way to jump over the evidence because you are determined to get to this end and you don't want to move. If you don't believe that Jesus rose from the grave, you should at least look at the evidence to see if you're right. I'll tell you as an atheist, if you want me to look at all the possible explanations, including the supernatural ones, they don't work. They have their own obstacles. I don't care that none of these explanations work. I want to be here, and there's only one obstacle in my way: my bias against the supernatural. So let me tell you how I handle this. As an atheist, I believed in Big Bang cosmology, which tells us that the entire universe came into existence instantaneously in the distant past, and I stayed there very dramatically. But then I realized that there was nothing before space. I'm looking for a first cause outside of space, time, and matter. If that first cause is a personal being, will it be like small potatoes to walk on water or small potatoes to do resurrection? At some point I realized the only thing standing between me and the resurrection, me and the cross of Jesus, was me. I want to encourage you to open up your minds to the other possibilities and text me the word detective at 66,866 to get all this stuff. We have 5 minutes to do 1 or 2 questions. The first question is always hard, so we'll skip it and go to the second question. A case from 1979 is my favorite case. It's called Dateline. The Wire is a 2-hour episode of Dateline where the killer used a strangulation device called a garage. The case was opened in 2003 and the killer was convicted in 2014. Go, what was your longest case? Probably my longest case was probably 11 years, but all of them on that left like 8 to 12 year range. Stupid, but that's just the way it is. I have a lame reason to be a detective. I looked around the office and didn't see anyone who looked like my wife and I. My dad was watching TV in his office on Thanksgiving Day and he said he wanted to work today so he could watch the games. He said he didn't know how many weeks off a year he got. He said I don't know, like 12. I joined the police department for a lame reason and God still used it to teach me the process that I ultimately used to become a Christian.